Cameron for Sportsbook Review. It's our SEC preview this week for the upcoming college football season. Later this week, we'll tackle the West Division. Today, we're going to look at the SEC East Division, which has been the poor man's division, I guess you could say, in the SEC the last couple years. Good conference top to bottom, but usually it's been the West teams that get all the accolades, especially in recent years. But this East Division looks like it's going to be highly competitive this season. We're going to break down every single team, rapid-fire fashion. Let's start with the Tennessee Volunteers. Could you get a team with more a trendier, sexier pick in terms of a national title contender than the Tennessee Volunteers? I mean, it seems like every college football aficionado known to man loves this Tennessee team. And talent-wise, it's hard to argue with that because they've got a ton of returning starters, 18 back, including 9 on offense, a senior quarterback in Joshua Dobbs, who should have a big season in store, a great running back tandem, Jalen Hurd and Alvin Kamara, a defense that is loaded with talent in terms of experience, depth, athleticism, 9 starters back there, the defensive line strong, dominant pass rusher and Derek Barnett, all 3 starters, 3 key starters returning at linebacker. The secondary has a lot of depth in it as well, loaded with quality talent, and should be the best pass defense that Butch Jones has had since he's been in Knoxville here with the Vols. However, this team isn't without challenges. I mean, we are still talking about, and Butch Jones has gotten this team to improve year in and year out that he's been there, but they lost a lot of close games last year. They did not close games well at all. They suffered a ton of close losses. They're going to have to find a better way, do a better job winning those close games, and that schedule doesn't do them any favors. I mean, for all the talent they've got, look at the late September, early October part of that schedule. For the Tennessee Volunteers, they got to play Florida, Georgia, Texas A&M, and Alabama in consecutive weeks. That's a tough slate. So you're talking about a team that's got to win the division, be a national title contender when they've got to navigate what I think is an extremely difficult 4-game stretch there in late September, early October. That's not a given for this Tennessee team, talent level aside. So, they're going to need to be able to win close games and get the job done. And don't forget, there's a lot of heightened pressure and expectations on this team. Can they handle it? That's the question. Talent-wise, they're as good as anyone in this division, in this conference. But still, this is not, this is rare air for Tennessee. We haven't seen Tennessee lauded as this good of a team almost since the Philip Fulmer era over a decade ago. So that's a big level of expectation that Tennessee's got to overcome. All right, Georgia Bulldogs next up. A team that's definitely going to have a different look on the sidelines. I mean, Mark Richt had been an institution there at Georgia as the head coach. He's finally given his walking papers, and Kirby Smart taking over as the head coach. Of course, Nick Saban's defensive coordinator all these years for all these tremendous Alabama teams that have had tremendous stop units. So there's a lot of expectations that Kirby Smart can be just as successful of a head coach as he was a defensive coordinator on Nick Saban's staff at Alabama. We'll see if he can get the job done. Now, Mark Richt did a solid job at Georgia, but they got to the point where they were sick and tired of, that not getting over the hump. For Georgia. They haven't won an SEC title in quite a long time now. They were so close on a couple of occasions and just couldn't get the job done. So they're hoping Kirby Smart able to take that team to that final level, I guess you could say, where they're up here winning an SEC conference. They got a 3-way quarterback battle ongoing right now. Jacob Eason, the freshman, I think is going to get it. He's got, the best pure talent of anyone, but Bryce Ramsey in the mix. Grayson Lambert being the senior still in the mix, although Grayson Lambert never really impressed me last year. Had some issues at times. In terms of the deep ball. So we'll see who ends up being the quarterback there. Concerns about Nick Chubb's health to begin the season at running back, whether he'll be ready to go, but they do have solid depth there. They lose Malcolm Mitchell at wide receiver, but they've got some decent options to replace him. There are concerns defensively for Kirby Smart. I know it's his background, but he's got some issues he's got to work out. First of all, 4 of their top 9 on the defensive line gone from last season, but they did recruit well. Still going to be a young defensive front. New personnel at linebacker as well. Definitely the strength of the D is the secondary. There's no doubt They returned quite a bit of talent on that side of pass defense that was ranked first last year. Should allow them to be a more aggressive blitz-heavy approach as well, because this secondary probably good enough to survive in one-on-one coverage down the field. So should be a great secondary. They're a contender in the East for sure. You put them right in there with Florida, Tennessee in this division. It depends on just how quickly the learning curve is. How quickly the players grasp it here with Kirby Smart in his first season as head coach. Florida Gators next up. What a job Jim McElwain did last year taking over this program. 10-4 season, including a 6-0 start. Really, they could have done better, but Will Greer's absence, out for the year, suspended, that really shook up this team offensively. They never really regained their footing offensively from that point on. That was a big-time concern. And now you've got a situation now where you're going to be looking at a new quarterback here for Florida, either Luke Del Rio, who's the son of Oakland Raiders head coach Jack Del Rio, or senior Purdue transfer Austin Appleby, who's the quarterback for the Gators. I'd be shocked if it's not Luke Del Rio. I think he's got more pure talent. I mean, Austin Appleby was a mediocre quarterback at a bad program, Purdue. Do you want that as your quarterback? I mean, he's probably got more experience. He does have more experience than Del Rio, but I think Del Rio's got more talent, and I think it's better to just break in Del Rio, see what he's got. I think he should be the quarterback here for this Florida team, but again, no decision has been made. They're still working through that in fall camp as the battle continues. Defensive line looks very deep, very talented. Depth of concern at linebacker, but the secondary looks very good. They should be right there with Georgia, one of the best secondary units in this SEC East division. That's the good news. Florida's going to be good defensively again. They were very good defensively last season. It's what kept them in a lot of games when their offense just continually went 3 and out. That defense is going to be good. It's how far they go and whether they win this division comes down to the quarterback play and the offense. It's got to be better or else they're not winning the SEC East this year. Missouri Tigers, next team on our SEC East preview, trying to bounce back from a 5-7 season last year. 15-year head coach Gary Pinkel gone, retired after last season. Barry Odom, who was the DC last year, takes over. So the transition shouldn't be too bad going to Barry Odom here as the new head coach of this Missouri team. And they've got potential at quarterback with this young sophomore Drew Lock. There seems to be some very, very good compliments being sent his way regarding his potential, an NFL prospect as well for him potentially down the road. He should have a major improvement first full year now as a starting quarterback. That passing game can't play any worse than it was last year. It was dreadful. It was non-existent. But, I think Locke, more experience. He got some playing time under his belt last year. I think they're finally going to be able to have some success in the passing game, at least a little bit. New offensive coordinator Josh Heupel served time on the Oklahoma Sooners coaching staff, so he's bringing a more up-tempo, fast-paced offense here to this Missouri team. On defense, that defense was pretty solid last year. They've got a great pass rusher, Charles Harris back, Terry Becker Jr. as well, who was injured last year, a key cog on that D front. He's back now that he's healthy. They lose their top linebacker, but they've got some depth, including Michael Scherer, a good option to fill in. Secondary's a bit of a concern, only 2 returning starters, but they seem to have a little bit more depth than last season. Just a question of how quickly the new starters assimilate themselves into this pass defense here for Missouri. You know what? They're probably not going to be a true top of the division contender in the SEC East this year, but I think they're an improved team, and I think because they had such a bad year last year, especially in conference play, they were dreadful. There could be some betting value, some point spread value with this Missouri team. Again, the head coaching change doesn't matter too much. Barry Odom was there last year. It shouldn't be a huge transition. I like the potential for Drew Lock at quarterback. I do think Missouri could be a little bit of a bet-on team this season. We'll wait and see, but I've got my eye on that Tigers team. Wildcats, pressure's on Mark Stoops. There's no question. 3 straight losing seasons without a bowl game. You're playing in a tough conference. I get that. You can't recruit as well as some of the other programs. I get that. But eventually you got to start doing something. And for Mark Stoops, if this is another losing season for him with this Kentucky team, could be curtains for him. Might have to cut the cord at that point if they don't get to 6 wins in a bowl game this year. Revamped offense. They got a couple of new co-coordinators, Eddie Grand, Darren Hinshaw. They're going to have a new starting quarterback, Patrick Tolles, transferred to Boston College. He did set the world on fire with Kentucky anyway, so it's not necessarily a bad thing. Drew Barker, likely the starting quarterback for this team. They've got a solid running back, trio led by Stanley Boom Williams. So they should be able to run the ball a bit. Receiving core looks solid, led by Dorian Baker. Defense, though, is the concern. Just 5 starters back, major area of concern for this team. They were at or near the bottom of just about every defensive statistical category in the SEC last season. That's going to have to get better, big time. Very young group. 6 of 7 starters from last year on the D-line alone gone. Upwards of 4 freshmen or sophomores starting in the secondary. That could be an issue as well. Very concerning issues with Kentucky defensively, and I think that could be the struggles and the growing pains for them on that side of the football. That's what could keep them, once again, from achieving 6 wins in a bowl game. I just don't see it for them. It's a tough schedule again. Lots of youth on defense. That's a problem, I think, for Kentucky, and I think we might be saying bye-bye to Mark Stoops after this season. South Carolina Gamecocks next up. Steve Spurrier era over in South Carolina. Will Muschamp brought in as the new head coach. Of course, Spurrier stepping down at the end of last season. Team that just went 3-9. We saw the writing on the wall that this team was in the middle of a downward spiral, and he got out. They got the hell out of there and said, "I don't need this. I'm going to enjoy some retirement here and enjoy my life a little bit with my family. I've made enough money. I've won enough games. I've coached long enough. I don't need this crap. I don't need this aggravation anymore at my age." Let's be honest. That's why he stepped down. I mean, it's pretty clear. So anyway, Muschamp takes over. The jury's out on Muschamp. Muschamp was a good defensive coordinator at Texas, okay, but when he got that Florida head coaching job, he didn't do anything with it. He didn't make that team better whatsoever. So the jury's out on whether he can make things go with this South Carolina team again. He's got to find a quarterback. Lorenzo Nunez, Perry Orth, incoming freshman, Brandon McElwain, all battling for that starting quarterback position. Less experienced at running back and at wide receiver, 2 of their top pass catchers gone, so plenty of instability. Only 2 returning starters on the offensive line, so a unit that struggled to score points last year and move the football. There could be some challenges this year, too. On defense, less experienced defensive line. 2 of their top 4 tacklers gone as well. Secondary question marks because it was just such a bad pass defense. They got shredded for big plays over and over and over again. Yeah, they have 6 of the top 8 back, but are they any good? Because those were 6 of the top 8 that were not very good last year. So let's see if that defense can improve. It is Will Muschamp's calling card, but to me, hard to envision this season for South Carolina being anything but a losing season, a rebuilding one. I don't expect them to get to 6 wins. And I think it's possible for South Carolina to finish last in this division here, because I think Vanderbilt, who's probably in the mix to be last, might be better and might be actually able to overtake South Carolina. And speaking of Vanderbilt, we're going to wrap up our SEC East Division preview with a look at the Commodores. Derek Mason in his 3rd season now as the head coach. This should be the year where we see this team take a little bit of a step forward. 0-8 in 2-6, I should say, in SEC play last year, 4-8. But still, we've seen little glimpses of progress, I guess you could say, from Vanderbilt, and I think it could continue here. 5 starters returning on offense. It looks like Kyle Shermer, the sophomore, and the son of former Pat Shermer, looks like he could be the guy with the starting quarterback job this year for Vanderbilt. He's certainly got some potential. It looks like there's optimism with this team in terms of being able to throw the football. 3 of their key receivers back who missed quite a bit of last season with injuries. So there's a potential if Shermer gets the job and can throw the football effectively. He's got some weapons to work with. The key for Vanderbilt in terms of them being able to compete this year, if they're going to compete and win games, that defense. They got 7 starters back. It was the strength of the team last year as well. And it should be pretty solid this year as well. I mean, there's a lot to like in terms of this defense. There's no question about that. I mean, when you look at it, 5 of the top 6 on the defensive line are back. That's a good sign. The linebacking crew really looks strong on paper and actually could be one of the top linebacking cores in the conference this season. 8 of the top 11 in the secondary are back for this team as well, so that's very good news for Vanderbilt defensively. Going to be interesting to see how well that offense plays. This is a team that is a little bit like Florida in this division. Defense should be solid, but what they get from the offense is going to determine how well they are. Because Will Muschamp's in year 1, Mason in year 3 here at Vanderbilt, that is part of the reason why I think Vanderbilt a little bit less of a learning curve here this season. they could overtake South Carolina. It may not be a basement team for a change here in the SEC East Division. I think Vanderbilt's another team similar to Missouri might offer point spread value here this season. All right, that will wrap up my look at the SEC East Division. We'll be back to look at the SEC West later on this week. I'm sports handicapper Ian Cameron for Sportsbook Review, and until next time.
Do your research before you bet. Check out our ratings guide to see which books have the best ratings and sign-up bonuses. Open up several accounts and shop for lines at sbrodds.com. Always be ahead of the game.